Welcome, everyone. It's truly lovely to be here with you tonight, this special evening, a special topic. Maybe I just want to start by thanking Laura Calderon de la Barcas for being here with us tonight. Yeah, and tonight we're here for the topic of women in leadership. Unleashing our wisdom from inner to outer healing. And it was touching when we sent out the questionnaire to hear that one of the most far spread challenges that you shared with us, all those who identify as women, is the issue that is often felt around feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling respected as we attempt to carry our inner healing into the outer world and to pick up that leadership that we take for ourselves in our inner healing for each other, to pick that up for the healing of the world, for the healing of the larger systems that we're a part of. And this challenge seems to be and is even more stronger when we live in the intersection of gender and other forms of oppression. Be it religious background, social background, skin color, we know it. So all of that. So we're also going to be exploring those places tonight. Yeah, and we want to explore how, by healing the trauma within, how we can become more authentic, more fully present in our healing of the trauma without. Yeah, great. So Laura, I've known Laura now for quite a few years, and it's just an absolute joy to be on this path with her, with you, dear Laura. Laura is an integral, intuitive psychotherapist, a cultural analyst, and a collective healing researcher who lives in Mexico City. Her engagement with collective trauma led her to write a PhD thesis that analyzed her home country, Mexico, imagining a psychotherapeutic healing session. And this was written in 2007. Laura has been studying with Thomas Hübl since 2016. I think I met you in the Pocket Project training in 2017.
Indeed, you were my mentor, my dear Kosha.
And you offer online therapy sessions, you present on psychoeducation, and you've also started to carry out healing from colonialism workshops with Indigenous communities, but I think with communities everywhere. Yeah, and we're delighted to also have you on the steering committee for research, but also for Indigenous voices in the Pocket Project. So Laura, I'm delighted to be able to be here with you. I'm just spotlighting you, and I'll join you for, no, that is not right. Thank you, Sunita. I'm completely handing over to you now. So it's really, truly a delight to have this chance of a conversation with you.
Thank you.
And I would like to, because the title really came from our first conversation, and I would like to start by asking you how your inner healing has led to a change and a development in your engagement for outer healing.
Thank you, Kosha. This is a topic that is very dear to my heart. The way that it happened was, very organic in terms of there were so many things I could not do because of the trauma that I was carrying that I did not know at the time was trauma. I started out feeling like there was something wrong with me, and I couldn't really understand why. I just knew that it was really hard for me to speak in public, particularly. And relating was hard for me. I would take things very personally, and I would be very bossy, and there was a lot of pain in my heart, and I could not show it and I could not share it. And I also knew I had things to contribute, but the way in which I would relate would not allow me to do that. So there was a lot of pain in my heart because of that also. So I really needed to start by looking at myself and looking at what's happening here. And as I started to discover that I was carrying dimensions of shame that had to do with the legacy that my parents and grandparents left with me, and that the level of reactivity that I had that seemed to not correspond with what was happening in the moment really had other dimensions in it. And that was, that part of my understanding came from my PhD. So my mind had, there was a part of the healing that really came from my mind, from understanding that what I was experiencing was not just mine. That was a tremendously powerful moment for me. I remember feeling like I was kind of almost reborn in that moment. And in continuing to walk that discovery and starting to unfold, what are these emotions that I'm experiencing in my body that have such tremendous impact on me? What if that really does have to do with me, with the bullying that I experienced at school? I went to a bilingual school in Mexico City where there were a lot of white people, and I was bullied. I experienced racism, and that had a really big impact on me. But there were these other dimensions that were also there. So the inner healing led me to discover, these dimensions, and also led me to start to find ways of 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 conceiving myself and what I was going through in a different fashion that could allow me to relate to myself with more compassion, with more love, and that made a huge difference. So when I remember moments where I would not be able to speak in public, I would not be able to where I felt like I had to hide what was happening to me. There was no room for that to be present. And that was one of the most important points of entry to this healing journey that I went through, because it led me to have to look at what are those things and why can they not be part of my experience? And so I started to discover that there were some rules of engagement that I was breaking by speaking out. As a woman of color in a wider space, and even as I say that right now, I can feel the resonance in my body. And now coming, sorry, go ahead, Kosha. Sorry, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry, I was just wanting to highlight that sentence that you just said, that there were rules of engagement that you were breaking as a woman of color that was speaking out.
Right.
Just feels so powerful to just acknowledge that. And how that feels when you feel that you're, I feel like I can feel that edge, the vibration that comes with like breaking through a sound barrier.
Right.
It's like breaking through a speaking barrier.
Yeah. And it
The
feels
courage
great
it takes, yeah.
for me to have you feel that with me, because I felt so alone in those moments. There, as I touch that place and I feel, the links to my own history, my parents were both the children of single mothers who tried really hard to, make it in the world. And so I was born into a different situation than the one that they were born into. And so they felt that just by giving me that chance, that would be enough for me to succeed. And they had no idea of the kind of discrimination I was going to be facing. So I felt like a failure because I was not being accepted in this white world. And I took it as a very personal failure of mine. Partially because my sister wasn't. She, even though she's darker, which was really interesting, she did not get called the names that I got called. For some reason, she was able to flow better. And some of those reasons is that I'm the firstborn. And so I inherited more of the family legacy of trauma, and she didn't, which I'm glad she didn't. But it was really painful for me to see her accepted and not me the same way. And so then that would reinforce the sense of there is something wrong with me. So then there's this kind of the layering of trauma that I had to break through whenever I needed to speak out or say something, to contribute, to show up in the world, to be seen. It meant also that if I did it wrong, my parents would look bad. I was going to make my parents look bad. And that would reinforce, oh, this dark-skinned person cannot do it right. So there were those dimensions that I was carrying, even though nobody actually said it, I could feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you just expressed how writing the thesis and actually mentally understanding the systemic dimensions of your experience, what a breakthrough that was. And I wonder
That's huge. Yeah.
how that translated from the mental to the emotional and the embodiment levels.
It was also a journey. If I could start at the beginning, I realized that being a woman of color and particularly being somebody of mixed heritage, part Indigenous and part Spanish, in this world that discriminates against Indigenous people in Mexico, other places for sure also, but in my country, I knew that there was a part of my pain that had to do with that, with Mexico not having finished accepting its Indigenous roots with honor and respect, having a true integration of the two roots in a new way of being. That hasn't fully happened here. Some of it has, but I could see that I was having an impact from that. So I felt, well, I need psychotherapy, but you know what? So does my country. So at the time I was getting trained as a narrative therapist. And so narrative therapy has got a very clear focus on identity. And one of the kind of foundations of narrative therapy is that we human beings have a huge amount of lived experience, and we need to organize it. The way we organize it is through stories. And so when the story we tell ourselves about ourselves and our lives is too narrow and it leaves out so much of our lived experience, that creates an issue, that creates pain. And so then what we need to do is to look for what in narrative therapy are called unique outcomes, events that could not be predicted by the dominant story. And so when I thought, okay, so if that is true for individuals, then that has to be true for nations that are made up of, us human beings. And so if in Mexico, one of the dominant stories is that Indigenous people are the reason that the country's behind, and all these prejudice, that they're lazy, that they're ignorant, like all these things. So outside of that story, there has to be a group of Indigenous communities or an Indigenous community that is really making it in life, and not in spite of being Indigenous, but because they are Indigenous. And I had no clue where to look for that. So I said, God, if I'm onto something here, you find these people for me. And about a week later on the radio, I heard this interview with a man called Perfecto Mesinas. Don Perfecto used to be the head of the Mancomun of Pueblos Mancomunados de la Sierra Norte de Oaxaca. This grouping in Man community of three groups of people that had been collaborating since before the Spaniards arrived in Mexico. So over 500 years. And I was blown away to hear about that. And then the person who was interviewing him started to ask him, so, I mean, do you guys have like problems with politics? Well, no, we've had political alternation, people from the right, from the left, from the center. We don't have, like a political line here. Everybody's welcome. Like, okay, what about religiously? I mean, do you have religious issues like other communities? No, we have people from Seventh-day Adventists. They rest on Saturdays. The Catholics, they rest on Sundays, and we'll go to the fiesta of the town. We share that together. And some people don't believe in anything, but everybody's welcome here also. And then he was like, okay, so how do you manage? You don't have problems with land, you don't have problems with any of these things. How have you managed when there's so many other communities that are having all these other problems? And this man said, well, because our communities are founded in love. And I knew, okay, these are the people I need to learn from. So I reached out and I found, over the internet, and I found somebody who had been working with them. So he invited me to come join them and to meet the people in the towns and propose to them what I was wanting to do, which was exploring together what was keeping us from being able to come together as a nation in terms of the kind of discrimination that they had experienced, but also, and very importantly, to share with me and with a group of psychotherapists that joined me for this adventure, what are the values, what are the beautiful things that exist in the indigenous communities that we other Mexicans don't get to learn about, And they themselves, I said, okay, can we support you in some way? And what they identified as a need was the young people were leaving the communities, looking to the city for who they were supposed to be and not looking at their own roots and leaving them behind. And so they were losing a lot of young people. So then what we decided to do together was create identity healing workshops so that we could come and learn about the identities of the older people and then share our gaze with the younger people so that this could become a healing process for them as well. That was a win-win for everybody. So we did this and we recorded this. And I thought that by exploring, the issue being discrimination, that was going to help heal me. At the end of those 4 workshops that we did, I was still feeling the same. And so I felt again like a failure. It was so painful. And then I reached out to someone else, to a teacher of mine, and told her, my dear Flora, this is what's happening. Could you help me? And she said, let's go to Oaxaca together. So she came with me to Oaxaca. And there we did several activities. But one of the things that we did is she sat down with me and she asked me, can you tell me about your life? And so I shared a bit about what I knew. At the time, I did not realize how big my birth trauma was. But when, as she realized, tell me about your parents. And when I told her about them being, children of single mothers and the kind of life that they led, which had a lot of tribulations, she said, okay, now I understand what's happening. She said, what you're experiencing is called shame, and a lot of it is not yours. And that moment was like, oh my God, why I've been feeling this makes sense, why this is in my body. But the relief to see, oh my God, it's not that there's something wrong with me, it's that I'm carrying something that was never healed. So that was a huge aha moment for me.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, I just read statistics actually for Germany over the last 3 years over COVID, that young women with eating disorders has risen by, it was a crazy number. Sorry, I can't even remember that, because what counts is 45%, but it seems so horrendous to me, or has risen to 45% of all young women. It's just extremely high. And I'm just thinking the sentence you just said, to say what you are experiencing is shame. And now I don't quite know how you said it, but most of that energy is not yours.
Right.
If you could repeat that sentence again, because it feels like if just each young woman You
Right,
know, each
right,
Indigenous person, each
right.
person of color could be told this
Yeah,
line
yeah,
and
yeah,
have it really land in them.
yeah.
It feels like it would be world changing, right?
That's what I felt. I mean, when I saw the difference it made in me, Kosha, it's like as if I had been carrying this massive load and rock on my back, and it just slid off my back. You know, like that's when the mental started to become also embodied. It's like, oh, like I could just release that it meant something about me. The fact that I felt this shame in my mind, it meant I believed that it was proof that I was flawed.
Mm.
And the moment I understood, no, there is a reason why this is here, but it doesn't mean that you are flawed. Oh my God, just the relief, you know? And so then I could start to engage with that in a very different way because it, you know, it did not mean anymore that I was wrong if I admitted that, because then that would mean that everybody could see how flawed I was. It took that away. Said, no, you know, we have shame. People have shame. This is precisely the impact of the trauma that we carry. This started, you know, in colonial times. And there's parts of it that now come from my parents. Yeah, but there's a bulk of why this is so intense and that's where I also started to really feel the collective dimension of that. You know, why my heart would beat so strongly. And by the way, yes, to those who are asking, my thesis is available online. It is where I have it now. It is written in English, but I've had it translated and I'll upload it, and I'm happy to provide the link for that. You can find the one in English in academia.edu. It's called Bridges of Love, a healing journey for Mexican identities.
What a beautiful
So
title. And maybe
yes,
Anna or somebody else, if somebody can also type it into the chat,
yes.
we'll make sure to send the link to everybody in the post email that you
Thank
will.
you. Thank you. So that was the first part of the healing when I realized, okay, so this is collective, it's called shame, and this is the leftover from colonialism. And when I looked around, I was like, man, oh man, so many of us have it. And I realized when I saw the difference it made me, this is what I want to devote my life to. I want to support others in being able to see this and start to experience the freedom that I'm feeling to be able to show up for the world. Now, I would love to, yes, that's it. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And so what I would like to link this now back to the leadership part, because part of what happened for me as I started to do my own healing work, you know, from that moment on, um, was that I can now see I was starting to digest all that material that made it overwhelming for me to be seen in public. Because that, you know, those being a leader means that you have to speak, you have to listen to an environment where you want to be of service. So the wanting to be of service was there from a long time ago, but the capacity to really listen was impacted by the trauma I was carrying, because I took it personally. Everything was simply about me. And so then I got in the way of the service that I wanted to provide, even if I did have things to say. You know, it came out distorted. I was really bossy. My friends would stop talking to me when I was younger because of that. And so, and I can see now how that was part of the healing that I would have needed to have done. And it took me a while, and I finally got to do it. And today I can see the difference. Like if I make a mistake, or if I am feeling vulnerable in some way, I can include that. And then when I include that, that settles, and that allows me to have enough space again to listen to what's happening to others, to attune to that space in between us, and really let it speak to me, and listen to see what's needed here now. And I can be part of that whole without having to take up space that is when it's not appropriate. I can now discern that much better. And so that allows me to see, oh, this is what's needed, bring it to the space, see if there's a resonance that I thought was there and that I felt was there. And if that is there, then noticing who's the best person to lead here, and then empower that. Sometimes that's me, but that's not all the time. And to be able to do that without making it mean like, oh, it's a failure because I'm not the one doing it. No, that was the hurt part of me that felt that I needed to prove that I was good enough.
This is amazing. It's so beautiful how you're explaining it. And I just love to play two things back again that you shared in a way just to allow them to land even more deeply in us. The one is, that when we take time for our own inner healing in those places where we have shame, we have contraction, we withdraw, that we're actually already doing healing in the collective because we are automatically healing the space between us as we heal our inner space.
Exactly.
And
To,
that's,
yeah,
yeah, it's just so strong, because we're
yeah.
so often being told as women also, because there is that natural, I think, calling for inner healing work. Also as we're mothers and we see the immediate impact that our issues are having on our loved ones, as mothers, or as you say, any woman who's in service. So to really go to that place of self-healing. And then, yeah, the second point you made, that as we learn to listen more, to receive more, that we become able to celebrate each other's leadership more. So
Yes.
just really enjoying the beauty of what you're bringing.
Thank you so much, Kosha. And part of the joy for me in sharing this is um, because I there's a love I have for collective intelligence, and that enabled me to participate in environments, particularly in the Pocket Project, in that first iteration of this training that Thomas offered. And I could just feel how we would riff off each other and how it would just, grow until like there were like really beautiful things coming out of our mouths that we didn't even know were there. So for me, part of the beauty of healing is that we become more capable of engaging like in like connecting to this higher order aspect of us that is calling us to come together so that it can download itself into the world through us, through the love we have for each other, through the willingness to be open to emergence, to that which comes up that we don't know is there, to the future that Thomas speaks of, the real future, So that to me is part of that. And to, you know, to share and touch this together with all of you, it's a gift to me because I can only experience that in community.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. So maybe that's a point where we could also go to the pain in
Right,
community
right.
and the topic of colonialism. And, you know, I've worked in the Global Eco-Village Network for many years where the pain of colonialism, enslavement was so deeply palpable. We know the same. So, yes, we'd love for collective intelligence to flower between us. And then as we move towards that, the wounds between us show up. I also saw in the chat one of us from Germany saying, I also carry such a shame as a white woman, for where I come from, for who I am. And I think all of us know shame on all sides of of this painful historic movement that we've had in humanity, and the role that the Western world has played in this, that Europe has played in this. And how can we come together in collective intelligence across this unhealed incredibly deep wounds.
Mhm.
So, yeah, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that in, and I'm touched to hear that, because I feel sometimes it's easy easier maybe um to speak to the shame that my for me from that my indigenous side has experienced, because um it was more evident that there was an impact on me. And when I could see that that impact is where the shame came from, then I could be with that more easily. What has been harder is to be with the shame that I feel on the side of me that has hurt others. In this case, not just my Spanish side, because this is one thing that I like to do, my dear Kosha, when I speak of this, and is to name that both sides have light and have shadow. And I feel it's important to hold that. But I had to develop enough space to hold that, both the light and the shadow of both, and to hold all of that with love. It took me a long time to develop that capacity. But I remember being a child, being about, I don't know, 5 years old. And I had trauma from my childhood that expressed itself in this particular moment that I want to share about. I remember there was this, I was playing around the pool in some resort with with my brother, sister, and other children. And there was this small child that was a toddler who was, wobbly walking. And I remember a moment where seeing it walk in a way that I would now call, with certain vulnerability, it could not walk fast. And I grabbed its hand and I yanked that child, because I felt there was something that felt like I wanted to attack that vulnerability, like make it wrong. It's like, this is how you walk. And and the mother saw that and came and, whisked the child up into her arms. And I felt so ashamed, my dear Kosha. And that moment determined that later I chose not to have children, because I knew I was going to need them. I feel very different about that now, but that was really the impact in my life. So I feel that it's, we need to develop the capacity to touch these places where we can see those wounds and how they come out in us, where we hurt others that are innocent, or that, that really show us a part of us that was hurt. My vulnerable side was hurt in different ways when I was a child. And so that part of me acted out that way. And today I can hold that with a lot of compassion. But it took a long time for me to be able to look that part of me in the eye and see within it the wounded part of me acting out.
Yeah, and I think,
Mm-hmm.
we've just been starting to work on that actually last week with Thomas,
Mm.
looking at where in our lives do we have those moments of transgression. And I think it's beautiful again, in a way you're doing again what we describe in the title of the session today, coming from the intimacy of the self and moving from there to the more systemic and collective levels, you
Right.
know. So I love that you're making that connection. And I think what we found is this, to really stand in this, I did that, and to bring that to a community that we can trust, to build a community that is
Mm.
so trustworthy that we can share that moment and feel the heat of shame, right? It was there now also when you share. It
Right.
could have been hotter if we had really, if this was even more, if we were all in one room and you could feel our love for you,
Mm.
but this like moment of hot heat, and then
Mm,
the reintegration of that into where it can be embodied, not held within and in isolation, but actually held in community. And
mm,
from there, the deeper restoration, the feeling of the other, of the small child, the possibility of a movement of restoration can arise. So it's like basically what you're describing is completely new healing way to work with transgression, which does not allow anybody to be locked away in prisons, but
mm.
a kind of restorative um, legal work also that is amazing and leads away from the repetition compulsion to a true integration process. But how do we bring it from that level to the collective level between,
Right.
say, Europe and the indigenous people?
To me, it's similar, like it's a fractal. I use that word. I love that word. And forgive me if it sounds a little technical, but it's this sense of like a whole that has little parts where the whole is represented again. And so if you work in this one, it will impact the whole. The whole concept of, for example, um, the acupuncture of our body. Like there's a model of the whole of our body between our hands, in our face, in our ears, in our feet. Reflexology knows that very well. And so we human beings are fractals, that we're structured that way. And so if we are able to face this part within us, then we can meet someone else who has also hurt others in an acting out of trauma and bring compassion. Because as I managed to develop this compassion for myself and soften within that, something got reintegrated in me. My own humanity got restored in me in a way. And so then I can then be with that in a different way when I hear somebody else who's doing that. Because I was able to look myself in the eye and see my wound, I can now look into the eyes of others and see their wounds, where sometimes they themselves cannot see it. But it really takes one being with one's own wound. That's why for me, it really starts with myself. And what you were saying, if I want to heal the world, something in the world, then my job is to start here, to develop that within myself so that it becomes a resource. And then it can be offered in a way where there's a solidity. Why? Because I actually went through the eye of that needle.
Yeah, and for me, a deep question that I'm walking with, and so great that I can bring it here to you, is, it's hard when we're touching on the places where we were victims.
Yeah.
Just to speak, for instance, for women, um, and of course, the double layering of that within colonialism, within enslavement, in all these places, there's a double layering.
Right.
But there's a wounding, and I think for many of us, when we go back into our female lineages, that that sound barrier of voice barrier, where the secrets of denigration, abuse, shameful secrets had to be kept and pushed down, goes back so far that there's a silencing that goes back so long. And it takes so much work to come through with that. And then to also start the work on owning the own perpetrator is a lot,
It's a
right?
lot. It is a
It's a
lot.
lot.
Yeah.
And especially when we do that in systems with people who are not yet owning. It's as if, what happens if, you as an indigenous person are willing to own your perpetratorship before the perpetrators are willing to own their perpetratorship. You know, there's just a space there where I start to feel very shaky
Right, right.
around, is that magnetically attractive enough to pull the others in? And what are the edges? Where are the borders of that work?
That's a very, very important question, dear Kosha. For me, in my experience, the first thing is like I needed to do my healing for me. Like I needed that. You know, if I ended up doing this whole collective piece, was because I needed that. And I discovered there was this whole dimension, right? And um, when I look at supporting others now, it only could come after I did this for myself. And to me, that feels like so crucial. Because if I do it for others and the others heal or don't heal, then I'm going to feel crushed and I'm going to feel again like a failure. No, it's first for me. And then I have something to share. And if other people are interested, then I can share. But the listening for, like, if I want to invite others, you know, in this impulse to support the healing of larger fields, then I need to see what's going on in their lives and really listen there. And so to place myself there, a lot of healing had to happen in me to go do that and to see where is their pain. What could actually move their heart to want to do this? You know, and I think there's different kinds of answers there, but for me, one crucial aspect that I was able to develop regarding, you know, becoming a leader in a field of collective healing is the capacity to really tune into the pain of others, or the that, you know, the freezing that feels really cold, and being with that, and not taking it personally, but recognizing, wow, there has to be, I mean, how much pain, how much shame, how much transgression must there be under this ice that it feels so cold? And can I hold that without judgment, but really with the compassion of looking at that as pain that cannot be felt as pain at this point in time, because it would be too overwhelming. You know, and so there was a path that I had to walk to be able to hold that and look there and see that. You know, I do some work with some, you know, white men who are in that place, who really wanting to look, and so we hold it together and we do it gently, and just we move at the pace of trust, as I believe it was. I think it's Peter Levine's phrase, but someone else's phrase, but I love that phrase, moving at the pace of trust, you know. But what you're saying, you know, about, you know, me as an Indigenous woman, I first had to do a whole lot of healing to do that, so that it, you know, when I see or hear things that are racist, sometimes I can be with that and have enough space, and how I feel today is generous to be able to do that. And I do it out of love for humanity, for myself, for the person I have in front. And it feels good to be able to do that. To me today, it's empowering. I don't think it would have been before. Before, it would have simply been appeasing, and, you know. So I want, and that's why I say my healing came first. Before being able to do that, I had to be strong enough where it really was a generous thing to do, and not just, you know, bowing down to somebody else's colonial power.
Yeah. Yeah, and I imagine that, you know, your healing is also an ongoing
Oh,
journey.
yes.
Yeah. So maybe, you know, because I also feel that there's so much coming through in the chat, and
Yes, I'd love to
it
do
would be
that.
lovely to hear some of your voices and insights and questions as well. But maybe to complete this part of the conversation, Laura, because you were an integral part of the last two trauma-informed leadership
Mm.
trainings that we offered through the Pocket Project and with Thomas Hubel, that now this training that is really specifically addressing the feminine aspects as well as the others is building on. So, how did this approach of trauma-informed leadership, what did it change for you? What was the inspiration, and yeah, how have these courses changed your engagement in the world?
Mm.
And what would you advise other women around, yeah, working with this content?
I love the question, my dear Kosha, because becoming more trauma informed really has supported me in noticing those places where I think there's an issue with me, and what's happening is that there's a layer of trauma that is not integrated that I can then address, and so that not identifying with the symptom, that was enabled for me through a lens of trauma, looking at leadership. It has allowed me to more deeply own whatever is there of trauma that's ready for me to see it, because I'm sure there's more layers, but the ones that are ready for me to be able to see and integrate now. And I feel I've become more spacious, more open, more generous, more tolerant of when things don't go well, and to listen more deeply, you know. And also, I've felt really touched in hearing from, my fellow teammates about their own vulnerability. And that, I feel, is part of what really helps us create like a different kind of bonding, a healing bonding, not a trauma bonding, but a healing bonding on the one hand. And then hearing from people who have a lot of experience that is different from mine has also enriched my own practice. And I've taken some of the exercises that I've heard and adapted them, and used them in my own work. So it really has like deepened my capacity as a leader on the one hand. And the other thing that I feel is a true contribution is inviting people who are interested in leadership, because I think there's a certain quality around leadership. This willingness to be of service, to put yourself, to show up in the world, to participate, um, to put your intelligence, your heart, your body, your soul at the service of something larger. And when you feel that resonance with others, I feel there's, not from a place of competition, which for me, that's much more the place of trauma, but really from the place of collaboration, which is this excitement I feel about collective intelligence. When we can do, oh my God, we don't even know what we can do when we're together from that place, you know? So there's an excitement and a welcoming of the unknown that can happen at a higher level. So we can become the vessel for higher intelligences of a higher order to flow through us when we're doing this together as leaders. So higher order intelligence for leadership for the world is like, what's there not to like,
Yeah, yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And I know we just, we're receiving scholarship applications also at the moment for the upcoming training. And one young woman who applied wrote, my mother participated last year, and I've just seen her whole team, her organization, everything has transformed, and now our family is transforming. I want to do this
Wow.
course. So, it's interesting the huge difference it can make when we really shift from this, what is wrong with me, what is wrong with you, to really looking at, wow, what is it that wants to be seen here? Yeah, so maybe I would just start with one point that came in here. I'm just trying to find it back. Clementine, who says, it feels like my healing will take a whole lifetime, but my passion wants me to be involved now. So I hear this question, which I also got a little bit, from listening to you. How much do I have to heal myself first before I can hopefully engage in the world? And how much is this one process? What would you say?
That's a very good question. I would say that there's different ways of engagement, different levels, and that I think it's great to feel, to start small and to allow it to build so that you don't end up overwhelmed. For me, that's the line. I mean, doing things, there's a lot more that I would love to do in the world, but right now I don't yet have the capacity for that. And I'm happy to continue building my capacity for that. But there are certain things that I can already do in the world. And so I'm doing those and enjoying doing those and allowing myself to continue to grow through that. Because that's also the other side of the process of trauma healing, that more light of yours gets liberated and comes back into the flow of life. So you have more space to do things that you couldn't do before. So for me, what I would say is I like to swim in that sweet spot where it's like, now I can do this and there's more that I learn. And, I would love to do that. And I'm not yet ready for that, but that's okay because I can already do this. And so part of what I feel trauma has left me with, the trauma healing process, is for a profound gratitude for my life and what I do have today, and with the joy of what might seem little maybe to others, but I don't care. It's what life is made up of, all these little moments that, and to me, this is where it also touches the spiritual dimension of life. It's being in the present with way more of myself, way more fully, and much more available to enjoy everything that is here now. And so then that's where I would invite you to look, what can you do? If your ambition is to do something really big later, awesome, but don't let that stop you from doing the small things, and don't make them wrong because they're smaller than what you dream about. Because it's we're building, and every interaction where we touch someone's heart or our hearts gets touched was totally worth it. I don't care if it was one person, you or 20 or 100 or 2000. Like it's touching a human soul is always a sacred thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's your own or someone else's.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I think it's also part of the sisterhood or the collective intelligence that we actually support each other by some feedback around, this is where I see your spark. And this is where you could come more forward. For me, I keep being deeply touched by people who are fresh, new, who bring new approaches, who've never done something before, and are extremely courageously following an impulse. I need to do this. And, it's so often there where the true freshness is brought out. So I would love us to encourage each other in the truest sense of the word in these spaces. Yeah. And we're coming to the end of our call. So, Laura, I want to thank you very deeply for being here with us tonight and bringing your worlds closer in your own life and your world closer in this call. Thank you. And maybe there's any last words you would like to say just to complete for today.
But first of all, a big thank you for the opportunity of sharing this, and a big thank you for everybody who has joined us. And this is a really complex topic that I feel we're just starting to unfold today. And I would love to come back and do some more work together and to explore together in a different moment. So I'd love, my dear Kosha, to, connect with you again and think when can we continue this conversation, for there is still much more to be explored, as there's, the ongoing trauma that is still present today. And, not just for us as women of color, but also for us as women. There's many other dimensions that we did not touch upon. So I would love to come back and explore some more with you, and maybe with other people also. We can talk about that. I think that'd be lovely. So gracias a todas. Danke vielmals. Everybody who was here, a todos los que estuvieron aquí. Blessings, bendiciones. Alles Gute.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. And the one place where we're definitely going to continue and deepen this work is, of course, the Trauma-Informed Women in Leadership Training. The first session will be on the 31st of May, and we're going to go on a real journey through the different layers of, in a way, also very much how you explained it today, starting with the trauma, how it shows up in us, how we can learn the basic competencies, befriending our nervous system, finding our voice, but also bringing that into the systemic understanding of systems of oppression, of healing architectures as women, strengthening each other through this journey of getting to know each other more fully. So there are scholarships available, especially for women from the Global South and for women from Ukraine leaders. But also, we're having a global social witnessing call. I'm not sure it's on the website yet, but Sunita is also working on this, which will be specifically addressing the collective trauma of colonialism and of enslavement. Held by Anqueta, who's originally from Cameroon and lived in South Africa for many years. So she will be hosting a call on a global social witnessing call on colonialism, which can also be a second step. We're also really excited about our next Women in Leadership community of practice calls, which will be with Maria Leister, who's herself, I think she also came from Mexico, Laura, and she's now leading the Harvard program for refugee trauma. And she will be holding again an open call, a free call for all of us around the movement for collective restoration, bringing our compassion into the world. And this will be on the 25th of May. And also we'll have our very next global social witnessing call, which speaks to the body of the planet rather than the body of women. So bringing this topic into a global level, climate change, the climate crisis, and speaking to voices of protection. So thank you all for being here with us tonight. We're continuing this journey on many different levels. Laura, you will be with us again for sure, and we're already looking forward to that. And
me too.
Thank you for the multitude of voices that are leading us forward. And thank you to all the men who were here with us tonight. And thank you to all the beautiful women who were here with us tonight. And thank you to all of you who are moving in between those polarities. Welcome and buenas noches.
Buenas noches.